The black alien ship cut through Earth's morning sky like a knife, its surface so smooth it seemed to drink the sunlight. Admiral Park Ji-ho pressed his face against the thick glass of the observation deck, watching the strange vessel approach. The landing pad below, his heart hammered in his chest, but his face remained calm. Behind him, General Kim Min-ho fidgeted with his uniform collar, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. "They said noon," Min-ho whispered, glancing at his watch. "It's only 11:30. "Maybe they don't understand our clocks," Ji-ho replied, though he knew better. These beings had been monitoring Earth for months. They understood everything about humans, probably better than humans understood themselves. The ship landed without a sound, its metal hull gleaming like polished obsidian. No flames, no rockets, no noise at all. It's just a gentle settling onto the concrete pad as if the massive vessel weighed nothing. Ji-ho had seen the technical reports. The ship was the size of a football stadium, but it moved like a feather on the wind. A ramp extended from the ship's belly, and the alien delegation stepped out. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never lost a fight, never been told no, never had to worry about anything more dangerous than a paper cut. Their leader stood taller than the others, his reptilian skin shifting colors in the sunlight from deep green to bronze. He wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid silver, and his eyes held the cold intelligence of a predator. "Ambassador Velthor Ji-ho," said to himself, reading from the briefing file. The name felt strange on his tongue, like speaking a word. From a nightmare, the alien delegation entered the building through the main doors, their footsteps echoing in the marble hallway. Security guards stepped aside, their hands nowhere near their weapons. The orders had been clear. Treat these visitors with complete respect, no matter what they said or did. In the conference room, Ambassador Velthor settled into the chair at the head of the table, as if he owned the place. His translator, a small device that hung around his neck like jewelry, hummed softly before projecting his voice in perfect Korean. "Greetings, humans of Earth," he began, his tone carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I represent the Galactic Council, the governing body that has maintained peace across 17 star systems for over 3,000 years. Your species has recently achieved faster-than-light travel, which brings you to our attention." Admiral Park stood and bowed slightly, the gesture burning his pride like acid. "We're honored by your visit, Ambassador. May we assist you?" Reptilian's mouth curved upward in what might have been a smile, though it showed far too many teeth. "It is we who will assist you, Admiral Park. Your species shows promise but lacks the refinement necessary for galactic civilization. We offer membership in our collective, along with advanced technology and guidance to help you overcome your primitive tendencies." The words hit the room like a slap. Primitive tendencies. As if humans were animals that needed training. Dr. Lee. Sora, sitting to Ji-ho's left, leaned forward in her chair. She was Earth's chief xenobiologist, one of the smartest people on the planet. And she had just been called primitive by a lizard in fancy clothes. Her voice remained steady, professional. What exactly would this membership involve? Eyes glittered as he outlined the terms. Earth would dismantle all military forces, from nuclear weapons down to police departments. Humanity would relocate 60% of its population to designated colony worlds chosen by the Council. All scientific research would be supervised by Council observers. All space exploration would be forbidden without Council approval. In return, humanity would receive medicine, clean energy, and protection from the dangers of unsupervised space exploration. The alien spoke of these terms as if he were offering candy to children. "You make it sound like we have a choice," Dr. Lee said, her fingers drumming silently on the table. "Oh, but you do," Velthor replied, his voice smooth as silk. "Accept our guidance willingly, or we will be forced to implement protective isolation protocols. For the safety of the galaxy, you understand." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Protective isolation. The briefing files had mentioned that term. It meant quarantine, enforced by orbital weapons platforms that could turn Earth's surface into molten glass. Admiral Park felt the eyes of his officers on him. General Kim was gripping his pen so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Dr. Lee was staring at the alien with the focused intensity of a scientist examining a particularly dangerous specimen. The air in the room felt thick, charged with unspoken anger. "We'll need time to consider your generous offer," Park said finally. "Of course. We understand that primitive species require time to process such concepts. We will return in 30 standard days for your answer." The alien delegation rose from their chairs with fluid grace, their robes rustling like wind through leaves. They filed out of the conference room, down the marble hallway, and onto their impossible ship. Within minutes, the vessel lifted off and disappeared into the blue sky, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air where it had been. General Kim turned to his superior, his face pale. "Sir, are we really going to do exactly what they expect?" Park interrupted, his voice hard as steel. "We're going to look like grateful, backward children who know their place." But his eyes told a different story entirely. Elevator descended for what felt like forever, dropping through solid rock and reinforced steel until it finally stopped with a soft hiss. Dr. Choi stepped out into a world that officially did not exist. The underground laboratory stretched out before her like a scene from a science fiction movie. All gleaming metal surfaces and holographic displays that painted the air with blueprints of impossible weapons. She had been working here for 8 months now, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. Her eyes were red with exhaustion, her hands shaking from too much coffee and too little sleep. But the work was too important to stop. Every day that passed brought Earth closer to the Council's deadline, and every day brought them closer to slavery. "Good morning, Doctor," said Colonel Yoon Taik as he approached her workstation. He was a short, stocky man with graying hair and eyes that never seemed to sleep. "How are the mass drivers coming along?" And a gesture to the holographic display floating above her desk. The weapon looked like a mining tool, all industrial angles and utilitarian design. But hidden within its innocent appearance was enough. Destructive power to punch through the hull of a council warship like tissue paper. "Better than expected," she replied, her fingers dancing across the controls to rotate the 3D model. "The alien probe we captured last year had some interesting power coupling designs. We've adapted them for kinetic weapons that register as mining equipment to their sensors. The probe had been a gift from heaven, though the Council didn't know it. One of their scout ships had crashed in the Pacific Ocean during a routine surveillance mission, and human divers had recovered it before the aliens could send a rescue team. The technology inside had been like finding a library in a world of picture books." Colonel Yoon nodded approvingly. "Excellent work. The next council inspection is in 6 hours, so make sure everything is properly hidden." Above their heads, thousands of feet of rock and concrete separated them from the surface world up there. The Great Deception was playing out on every television screen and news broadcast. Earth's governments were dismantling nuclear weapons with great fanfare, destroying military satellites in spectacular displays of compliance. The Council's observers, those floating figures in their pristine white robes, watched everything with the satisfaction of teachers watching students follow instructions, but they saw only what humans wanted them to see, in the asteroid belt. Captain Zhang Wujin floated in the command center of the mining vessel Taguk, watching his crew work at their stations. To any observer, they looked like ordinary miners, their ship bristling with excavation equipment and/or processing machinery. The Council's sensors read it as exactly what it appeared to be: a civilian craft harvesting resources from dead rocks. Had no idea that the ore processors were actually mass drivers, capable of launching projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The mining lasers were military-grade weapons that could cut through starship armor like butter. And the miners themselves were veteran pilots from 12 different nations, the best warriors humanity had ever produced. "How many ships do we have now?" asked Lieutenant Shin Yuna, her eyes never leaving the sensor display. 47 combat vessels disguised as civilian craft, Wu Jin replied. "The Council thinks we're just enthusiastic about asteroid mining." The deception went far beyond hidden weapons and disguised warships. In conference rooms and laboratories around the world, Earth's brightest minds were dissecting every aspect of Council technology and behavior. They studied the aliens' casual comments, their body language, their assumptions about human capabilities. They learned that the Council's species had grown soft over millennia of peace, that their ships were designed for exploration rather than warfare, and that their greatest weakness was their absolute confidence in their own superiority. In a secure bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, Admiral Park addressed the Secret War Council. The room was filled with the shadows of Earth's most powerful leaders, their faces grim with the weight of what they were planning. "They see us as we were 1,000 years ago," he said, his voice carrying easily through the underground chamber. "Scattered tribes with primitive weapons have no concept of what we've become." Dr. Lee Sora stood at the front of the room, her presentation filling the wall-sized screen with biological data. "Their reaction times are slower than ours, their physical capabilities limited by their peaceful evolution. They've never faced an enemy that could match their technology." The charts and graphs told a story of weakness disguised as strength. The council species had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten how to fight. Their bodies were adapted for diplomacy, not warfare. Their minds were tuned for negotiation, not tactics. They had ruled the galaxy through superior technology and intimidation, but they had never faced an enemy that could match them in either area. "Soon they will," General Kim added grimly. "Every month." The Council's inspection reports praised humanity's remarkable compliance and eagerness to learn. The alien observers never noticed the carefully orchestrated performance. The way humans always asked just the right questions to extract more information about Council weaknesses while appearing grateful for the guidance. They never suspected that every piece of technology they shared was being reverse-engineered. Every casual comment was being analyzed. Every behavioral pattern was being cataloged for future use. The Council believed they were civilizing a primitive species. In reality, they were teaching their future conquerors everything they needed to know about how to destroy them. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning. It's transmitted through the deep space communication array that Earth had built to stay in contact with its colonies. Captain Beijisu was drinking her second cup of coffee when the priority alert flashed across her screen. The transmission was from the New Horizon colony on Kepler 44 to be 50,000 human settlers who had volunteered to start a new life on a Council-approved world. The entire message was one word: help. Bei set down her coffee cup with hands that had started to shake. The New Horizon had been humanity's greatest success story, shining example of how well humans could adapt to galactic civilization. The colonists had been sending regular reports for 6 months. All positive, all full of praise for the Council's guidance and support. Something had gone very wrong. Within 2 hours, Bei's ship was loaded with supplies and clearance papers that identified it as a routine supply run. The Council observers barely glanced at the manifest as she departed Earth's orbital station. Medical supplies, food, equipment replacements, the usual cargo that kept distant colonies running. They had no idea that hidden beneath the cargo bay floor was enough military hardware to level a small city. The journey to Kepler 44 to B took 3 days through hyperspace. During that time, Bei tried to contact the colony dozens of times, but received only automated responses. Everything was fine, the messages said. The colonists were healthy and happy. No problems to report. But the voices in the recordings sounded strange, flat, and emotionless, like people reading from a script. When Bei's ship dropped out of hyperspace near the colony world, the first thing she noticed was the Council medical ships in orbit. 3 massive vessels, each one the size of a small city, bristling with the advanced technology that the aliens used for what they called integration procedures. The sight of them made her stomach turn cold. The colony's spaceport was eerily quiet. No crowds of settlers to welcome the supply ship. No children running around the landing pad. No sounds of construction or daily life. Just silence and the constant hum of the Council's medical equipment. Dr. Ominsiok, the mission's medical officer, followed Bei down the landing ramp. He was a quiet man with gentle hands and kind eyes, the sort of person who had dedicated his life to healing others. The expression on his face as they approached the colony's main building was one of growing horror. "Where is everyone?" he whispered. The answer came when they entered the medical facility. Row after row of beds filled the massive hall, each one occupied by a human settler. They lay unconscious, their heads wrapped in bandages, their skulls surgically opened to expose their brains. Council physicians moved between the beds with the detached efficiency of veterinarians, their instruments gleaming under the bright lights. "They're removing the amygdala," Dr. O said, his voice barely audible. "The aggression centers, the fight-or-flight responses, they're turning our people into cattle." The council's chief medical officer noticed their arrival and approached with the confident stride of someone who had nothing to hide. Mortek was a slug-like creature with pale, glistening skin and eyes that seemed to contain no emotion at all. When he spoke, his voice was calm and professional, as if he were discussing the weather. "Ah, visitors from Earth," he said through his translator. "You have arrived at a most exciting time. We are helping your species overcome its violent tendencies, through a process we have refined over many centuries. Soon, your people will be peaceful, content, and productive members of galactic society." Captain Bay felt her hand move toward her sidearm, but forced herself to remain calm. "What have you done to them?" "We have freed them from the burden of aggression," Mortek replied. "Your species suffers from excessive violent impulses, a common problem among primitive civilizations. We have helped dozens of species overcome their primitive natures." Dr. O knelt beside one of the beds, examining the surgical site with growing revulsion. The human on the bed was a young woman, probably in her 20s, with short brown hair, and a face that would have been beautiful if not for the hollow expression in her eyes. Parts of her brain had been carefully removed, leaving behind a person who could follow orders but would never again feel anger, fear, or the desire to fight for what she believed in. "You're lobotomizing them," Bay said, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Such inflammatory language," Mortek replied with what might have been amusement. "We prefer neural optimization. Your Admiral Park will understand when he undergoes the procedure. Its aggressive tendencies make him unsuitable for leadership in civilized space." The words hit Bay like a physical blow. They weren't just doing this to the colonists. They were planning to do it to everyone, to the entire human race. Every leader, every soldier, every person who might resist their vision of galactic civilization. "I want to speak to the colony leaders," she demanded. Mortek gestured to a group of humans standing near the far wall. They had been the colony's elected officials, the brave men and women who had volunteered to lead humanity's first interstellar settlement. Now they stood with hollow eyes and constant smiles, their voices flat and monotone as they spoke about their gratitude for the Council's help. "The procedure is quite successful," Mortek said with pride. "They are now model citizens, completely free of the violent urges that plague your species." Captain Bay activated the hidden camera in her uniform, broadcasting everything back to Earth through the quantum communication link. Within hours, every human leader would see this footage, would witness what integration really meant. The Council hadn't just done this to humanity. They had done it to every species they had ever welcomed into galactic civilization. The galaxy wasn't peaceful because the Council had created harmony. It was peaceful because they had surgically removed the ability to fight back from every species they encountered. Commander Zephanol had been watching Earth for 8 months, and he was bored. The human planet hung in his viewing screen like a blue marble, peaceful and harmless. His monitoring station, the Eternal Vigil, was the size of a small city packed with sensors that could detect a single missile launch from halfway across the solar system. For months, those sensors had shown nothing but compliance. The humans had dismantled their weapons just as ordered. Their military satellites were gone, their nuclear arsenal destroyed, their warships converted to civilian use. It was exactly what the Council expected from a primitive species, learning its place in galactic civilization. Not Noel's reviewing the daily reports when his instruments started screaming. Dozens of contacts appeared on his screen, ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. His 4 eyes widened as he studied the tactical display, his scaled hands dancing across the controls. "Where did they come from?" demanded his second in command, a nervous creature with too many arms and not enough brains. "Unknown," Zephanol replied, his voice tight with confusion. "They appear to be mining vessels. The ships looked harmless enough. Industrial designs, cargo holds, excavation equipment, but they were moving in military formations, their approach vectors calculated with mathematical precision. Something was very wrong." The first salvo answered his questions. The mining vessels opened fire with weapons that turned the monitoring station's shields to colorful light shows before punching through the hull like it was made of paper. Zephanol had just enough time to realize he had been fooled before. The eternal vigil became an expanding cloud of plasma and debris. Captain Zhang Wujin watched the monitoring station die through his ship's main viewer. The Taguk had spent months disguised as a mining vessel, its crew pretending to be simple workers harvesting rocks from the asteroid belt. Now the disguise was gone, revealing weapon systems that made the Council's peacekeeping ships look like children's toys. All units, this is Admiral Park, came the transmission across encrypted channels. Operation Prometheus is now active. Show them what humans do to those who threaten our children. The assault was coordinated across 3 star systems simultaneously. Council installations that had stood for centuries disappeared in minutes as Earth's hidden fleet struck with surgical precision. The alien ships, designed for exploration and diplomatic missions, were slaughtered by weapons specifically engineered to exploit their weaknesses. On Kepler 4 to B, Colonel An Kyung-ho led the ground assault on the integration facilities. Soldiers moved through the medical complex like avenging angels, their powered armor shrugging off the Council's energy weapons while their railguns punched through alien defensive positions. The Council had never faced an enemy that fought back, and their peacekeeping forces crumbled like sandcastles before the tide. Medical wings secured, reported Sergeant Han Soo-jin over the comm. We've got about 300 humans in various stages of surgery. The Council's guards, creatures who had spent centuries intimidating primitives, broke and ran when faced with human soldiers who had spent months planning for this moment. Their weapons were designed to stun and subdue, not to kill. The humans' weapons were designed to turn living beings into red mist. Captain Bay coordinated the civilian evacuation while her medical team worked frantically to save the partially lobotomized colonists. Some could be helped, their brains intact, enough to function normally. Others were lost forever, their minds carved up so thoroughly that they would never again be truly human. But all would be going home. In the depths of space, the Council's main fleet was mobilizing. 67 vessels, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering, designed to awe primitive species into submission. They had never lost a battle because they had never fought one. For 3,000 years, superior technology and intimidation had been enough to keep the galaxy peaceful. The Council's main fleet is mobilizing, reported Lieutenant Shin from the bridge of the Taguk. 67 vessels, heading for Earth. Let them come, Admiral Park replied over the comm. We'll be waiting. The Battle of Seoul lasted for hours. The Council's impressive fleet, designed to inspire fear and wonder, met human tactics that had been refined through millennia of warfare.
Captain
Wujin's squadron used the asteroid belt for cover, appearing from behind rocks to launch devastating ambushes. The Council's energy weapons, effective against their usual opponents, were useless against human ships designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks. The alien ships were beautiful, all flowing lines and elegant curves that spoke of a civilization that valued art over violence. The human ships were ugly, brutal things that looked like they had been designed by committee in a bad mood. But when the two fleets met, beauty died screaming, while ugliness pressed forward through the wreckage. The Council's commanders, beings who had never faced an enemy that could match their technology, panicked as their carefully ordered formations dissolved into chaos. Their ships were faster, their weapons more advanced, their technology superior in every measurable way. But they had never learned to fight dirty, never learned to use every advantage, never learned that sometimes the only way to win was to be willing to lose everything. When the last Council ship was destroyed or surrendered, Admiral Park opened a channel to every inhabited world in the galaxy. His message was simple and broadcast in 1,000 languages. This is Admiral Park, Jiho of the United Earth's Defense Force. The Galactic Council has been defeated. Any species wishing to be free is welcome to join us. Any species wishing to maintain the old system will be treated as an enemy. Choose wisely. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. The harmony of worlds had been the most beautiful structure in the galaxy, a crystalline palace that floated in the void like a frozen star. For 3,000 years it had been the seat of council power, the place where the fates of entire civilizations were decided with the stroke of a pen. Now it hung dead in space, its lights extinguished, its corridors echoing with silence. Ambassador Velther sat in the detention cell aboard Admiral Park's flagship, his scaled hands shaking as he stared at the metal walls that had become his world. A Pillian diplomat who had once spoken with the authority of 17 Star Systems now looked like a broken old man, his silver robes torn and stained with the blood of his fallen guards. When the human commander entered, Velther looked up with eyes that held no hope. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "How did a primitive species defeat the entire council?" Admiral Park pulled up a chair and sat down, studying the broken alien with the same detached interest a scientist might show a specimen. He had aged in the months since the war began, his hair showing streaks of gray that hadn't been there before. But his eyes were steady, cold as winter ice. "You made the same mistake every bully makes, Velther," he said quietly. "You assumed that because you'd never been challenged, you never would be." "We offered you everything," the ambassador protested, his voice cracking with emotion. "Technology, medicine, guidance. We could have lifted your species to heights you never imagined. You offered us slavery dressed up as civilization," Park corrected. "The difference is that we knew what you were really offering." The reports coming in from across the galaxy painted a clear picture. The Council's member species were rising up, their suppressed populations turning on their alien overseers with centuries of accumulated rage. The neural modifications that had made them docile were being reversed by human medical teams, releasing warriors who had been bred for peace but remembered how to fight. General Kim entered the cell, carrying a datapad with the latest intelligence reports. His uniform was clean and pressed, but his face showed the exhaustion of a man who had been fighting a war across multiple star systems. "The hegemony has surrendered," he reported. "The consortium is requesting terms. The Federation is begging for mercy." Velthor's head snapped up at the news. Impossible. The hegemony has ruled for 2,000 years. They have the strongest fleet in the galaxy, had Park corrected. Past tense. Their fleet was designed to intimidate primitives, not fight. A real war. The truth was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. The Council's member species were learning what had really happened to their ancestors. How their natural fighting instincts had been surgically removed. How their cultures had been reshaped to serve alien masters. The revelation was like a match thrown into a powder keg on a dozen worlds. Former Council allies were discovering the hidden medical facilities where their people had been optimized for peaceful service. Ancient warriors were remembering what they had been before the Council's physicians had carved away their ability to resist. The galaxy was waking up from a 3,000-year nightmare. "What do you want?" Velther asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Resources? Territory? Technology? We can give you anything." "What we want," Park replied, "is very simple. The Council is dissolved. Every species you've subjugated is free to govern itself. Humanity will make sure that no one ever again decides what other civilizations deserve." "Can't mean to rule the galaxy," Velthar said, his voice cracking with desperation. "That's impossible. The logistics alone, we don't want to rule the galaxy," Park interrupted. "We want to make sure it stays free. There's a difference." The final council meeting was held in the ruins of their former capital. Representatives from dozens of species, many still bearing the scars of their integration procedures, gathered to witness the end of an era. Some walked with mechanical limbs, replacements for body parts that had been removed to make them more suitable for civilized life. Others spoke through artificial voice boxes, their natural voices stolen by surgeons who thought they were too loud or aggressive. Dr. Lee Sora presented the evidence of the Council's crimes while Captain Bay testified about the horrors found in the integration facilities. The testimony went on for days, a litany of surgical torture and cultural destruction that stretched back centuries. For 3,000 years, You maintained peace through fear and mutilation, Admiral Park told the assembled aliens. You turned proud warrior races into docile servants. You convinced entire civilizations that their natural instincts were flaws to be corrected. The final vote was unanimous. The Galactic Council would be disbanded, its member species freed, its leadership held accountable for crimes against sapient life. As the former council members were led away to face justice, Belthar made one last desperate plea. You're making a mistake, Admiral. Without the Council's guidance, the galaxy will descend into chaos. Wars will break out. Civilizations will destroy themselves. Admiral Park paused at the door. Maybe they will. Maybe some species will fight. Some will fall, and some will rise. But they'll do it as free beings making their own choices, not as cattle being herded by their betters. The ambassador's final words echoed through the empty chamber. You could have been civilized. We tried to help you. But the galaxy had already moved on, leaving the Council's dreams of eternal peace buried in the wreckage of their crystalline palace.